What's good, YouTube, and welcome back to the channel. Today, I have a deck list I want to talk about. It's a Spright deck list. I'm going to have a lot of these coming out, hopefully, over the next few weeks or so, as I start to play in the new format, which I think has its issues, but it is very fun, because as strong as engines like Spright are, they are actually quite creative in what you can do with them, because there are lots of good level 2 monsters, obviously. So the deck in front of us today, I call this one Dark Spright, or you could call it, Allure Spright, Beckoning Beast Spright, but I think Dark Spright encapsulates pretty much what we're going for. So the context behind this deck is I used this one at 2 tournaments. I went 4-0 at a locals, and then I played this one at a store credit tournament with about 60 people, which was 6 rounds, and I bubbled that one. Unfortunately, they had a top 8 cut. I went 4-2, but both of my losses were definitely misplays on my end. So overall, this deck list went 8-2 in terms of game score, and I think it is quite reflective of its true parallel level, because it did feel really strong playing it, and it seems like it definitely has a high potential in the current format. So logically, what am I trying to do here? Well, we're mainly trying to play Allure of Darkness, because we're going to assume that our opponent's not going to negate Allure of Darkness, so that we can draw into our higher impact cards like Triple Tactics Talent and Dark Ruler No More. I say this because in general, it's very hard to hand trap Spright effectively, because especially in this build, like this build has more tools than other regular builds to play through hand traps via extenders and via different engines. But in general, the low impact hand traps like Ash Vela, Imperm, even Ghost Ogre on their own against Spright are not great. Even in multiples of those ones, they're not great. You need to have Nibiru plus those cards for them to be like truly effective. Then even then, there's a small possibility your opponent could just completely outplay it. Which is a big thing that this deck does. Like, this deck can really outplay all the hand traps quite well and fairly consistently. So we're trying to play Allure of Darkness, so obviously you need to fit in some more dark monsters to accommodate that strategy. And so we're playing the Dark Beckoning Beast engine, which is 3 Dark Beckoning Beast and 2 Opening of the Spirit Gates. So if you don't know what this one does, Beckoning Beast searches Spirit Gates, and then Spirit Gates searches another Beckoning Beast. And then Beckoning Beast's second effect is you can get an additional normal summon of a 0/0 Fiend. So in this deck, it can additional normal summon itself or Capture. I'll get back into Capture in a moment. And then Spirit Gates, you can discard a card to special back a 0/0 Fiend. So I'll show a little bit of a combo video later, but you just get a lot of material to work with off a single card, which is the Dark Beckoning Beast. And then a thing that you can commonly do in this deck is, say if you don't have one of your 9 powerful Spright cards, those 9 being the blue, the jet, and the starter, you often go Beckoning Beast, Spirit Gates into Beckoning Beast with the Allure in your hand. So then you can Allure fairly safely, knowing that you don't really need this second Beckoning Beast, because your main strategy is of course drawing Spright monsters. So it's just good to synergize with, play max copies of this, because you do want to Allure Darkness it away. And then moreover on the Capture, this is a bit of a, I guess, bad idea that I had that turned out to be quite good in practice. This card performs very highly for me when I use this one. If you don't know what it does, when you use it for a link material, you just draw a card. And if it's detached to activate an XYZ monster effect, you also draw a card. That is a problem in this deck, because Gigantic doesn't detach for cost, so it doesn't trigger Capture, but you're always linking this away. I even forgot that you could just normal it and turn it into Almirage straight away. So it's always going to draw you a card, which is really good, obviously, because whenever a tier 0 strong deck can just draw cards for free, that's really good. And often cases where you have Swap Frog already, you drew Swap Frog, or you already have a Toad because you drew like Frog and another Frog, you can often Gigantic into Capture just so that you can draw a bonus card. And then what are you really trying to draw into? Well, you're really trying to draw into like Crow, Talents, or Droplets. Your draws aren't insane because you're not playing the low impact hand traps, but it's stronger in games 2 and 3 after your side deck, where you can draw into Solemns or Floodgates, like There's a theory I should be playing some more Floodgates. Maybe Solemn Judgment is kind of bad, because this deck, unlike regular Spright builds, like you actually can draw cards. Like you can draw, 2 to 4 based on, 1 or 2 allures, and then a third or a fifth of the cap shell. So you do cycle through your deck for those options. So I don't know if you need to play 2 or 3 or 1 of this. I don't know, but it just continue to perform very, very, very highly. And then probably the last, I guess, unusual monster would be Caligo Claw Crow. It's just a generic dark level 2 that you can special summon out of your hand if you control a dark monster on the field. So obviously Blue and Jet are dark, and the Dark Beckoning Beast is dark. So the logic of this one is that it's a dark monster that you can draw off Allure of Darkness and use it as an extender, which is quite unique. I don't play more than 1 because I don't really want to run the risk of drawing 2 and only be able to special summon 1. But, I have a good opinion on Spright that many game sets I get into, where you get hand trapped or you get interrupted, all you really need most times is you just need another level 2 monster to play so that you can continue comboing. And this deck follows a lot on that logic, because, we have more additional normals, we have more specials, and we even play like cards like Monster Reborn and World Legacy Succession. This card definitely does not need to be in the deck, the World Legacy Succession, but I think in like all Spright builds, Monster Reborn should be an absolute staple card, simply for its ability to play through hand traps, the ability to take your opponent's monsters and link them away, or use them as XYZ material, because insane in the Spright Mirror, any monster can be turned to make elf, and it just makes your end board stronger. So it's good first, good second, good against hand traps. It just does everything you want, and it's an absolute wombo combo with Swap Frog, because if you normal swap, send in another swap, reborn that swap, you just make a Toad almost immediately, which is just very hard for your opponent to interact with any of your cards. If you, second, third or fourth summon a Toad, that's just ridiculous. Crazy, crazy, crazy good. And then I do play as Spright Pixies, because mainly same logic as the Caligo Crowclaw. It's an extra dark, I can banish off Allure, I can special it if I draw it. Has a very useful, honest effect, honestly. Again, hard to say in theory, but in practice it comes up more than it should, which is, concerning, because does that mean should this card be staple in all Spright decks? I don't know. Definitely has some applications against Tialement. Definitely has some applications with protecting your boards from being swung over if you don't have Dupe Frog, or if you've used it already. So, yeah, it's good. I guess double red. I like double red in general. I even like 3 red sometimes. Again, a lot of players still just rely excessively on hand traps. They haven't really figured out that there are low and there are high impact hand traps. And just having more of this card can really, really, really help you, especially because Dark Beckoning Beast on its own is like 3 level 2 monsters. So even in just having Beckoning Beast and red as your only Spright, you can just make sure that this play goes through, and it feels quite good. I am playing a hand trap though. I am playing Deity Crow, but I don't really consider this one a hand trap per se, because you can draw it as your 6th card, and it can actually interact with the Spright board and the Tialement boards in their Fuse Out of Graveyard effects. And of course, it's a dark monster that fills your Allure of Darkness, so it can be work first or going second. That's why I decided to play it, and overall it performed quite well, even because there's a lot of punk combo decks still going around, and there's the new version of that also Deity Crow kind of can impact that deck as well. So I don't regret playing the Deity Crow. Pretty much 43, you probably could just play it 40, 41, 42. Like, you don't need to play the World Legacy Succession. Random Droplet is a random Droplet, mainly because I don't want to always discard my hand, but sometimes you can go like Allure, Chain Droplet, which is quite good. And then Call by the Grave, obviously. And the main point of the side deck will probably be the Winter Cherries as well, where we decided Kit Kalos. Cherries is under the same logic of Allure of Darkness and Deity Crow. Like, they're hand traps that, work really well on your first turn, obviously. Like, Cherries is an absolute blowout because you play, the Toad or the Elf. Usually, you're cherrying the Elf. But there are cases where maybe your opponent just immediately starts with Pitch Swap, and then goes effect. Maybe you need to hit the Toad in case your hand just cannot absolutely deal with that Omni-Negate presence. Like, hitting Toad in that case means they might just Elf for red and then IP, so they might not even have carrot. So if you have like a spell card board wipe, that's probably a case where I would Cherry's Toad, but it's usually Cherry's Elf because they use Elf to make their Toad in like 90 or 80% of hands. And then using this card is just crazy. Like Allure lets you draw into more of it, going second. If you draw it for your 6th or your 7th or your 8th, you can just banish it, keep all the other good dark monsters in your hand. High performing card, super high impact, and it's in this weird realm of its own, where you don't need to play like Ash, Imperm, Veiler, Ogre alongside that one, because you kind of don't care what they do unless the rest of your deck can handle or can't handle a certain interruption. The rest of the side deck's pretty standard. Other Mind Control, Change of Heart, they're kind of like for the mirror match, but they also overlap into other matchups because again, you can just take anything you want, link it away. I think these are pretty low impact though. Like, it's really painful. I want to just play Droplets because you're just so reliant on the going second just to be able to break through the things you can't interact with, like Toad. And then, you know, this deck really equalizes quite well with Zeus. Key points of the extra deck would be the Djinn Buster. You get the 2 level 2 darks very easily thanks to the Dark Beckoning Beast. And more so, just makes your deck more resilient and hand trap proof. So yeah, why not? And everything else is pretty standard. I wanted to play both the Crusader Avramax and the Underworld Goddess because you kind of need some way to out the unaddable creatures, which is usually the Underworld Goddess, and then Avramax can just be an auto win in many game states against the element. So that's why I decided to play both, because I could fit both, and I would rather have the auto win condition. I don't have any tuners in my deck apart from the cherries. I don't need to play the Hulk stuff. Hulk is good in Spright. I don't think it's the best. I don't think it's like super crazy, but Hulk is, you know, Hulk is Hulk. I can't really say no. So yeah, I'll jump into some quick combo videos and talk about how they interact against the hand traps. So just to visualize and to show you guys perhaps all the things that you can do of this card, we'll just run through the basic lines of combos. So normal summon Dark Beckoning Beast, and then you would get the Spirit Gates. Then you would activate that to search another copy of itself, and then you get the additional normal summon. So now you already have 2 monsters off of 1 card. And then because these are both normal summoned, you can turn them into Almirage. Almirage is quite good against playing against enemy Ghost Ogres, so it really helps you, I guess, just automatically nullify one of your opponent's hand traps if they have them. And then you do the second effect of the Spirit Gates to discard any card to summon back the Beckoning Beast. So then you've got, you know, that's your 3rd monster off your single card. So you got 1, 2, 3 more monsters. And then usually what you would do, it can vary, but you would usually turn these into the Djinn Buster, because in this example, assuming you have a card like Starter, like this gives you the Ash block for your starter. Again, it's kind of, would they Ash the Dark Beckoning Beast? Like there are people that might not know you're playing Spright in your deck. If this is like game 1 and you start with that play, would your opponent Ash it? Would your opponent Veiler it? Who knows, based on the player. But if they don't, it's good to know that you can guarantee your plays. Like, it's, you know, the more ways to throw off your opponent, as if you're not playing the standard Spright build, the more likely they are to misplay with their hand traps, the more advantage that you will get. Which did happen for me a lot playing this deck. So for example, you know, simply, we'll rewind a bit to say where we have just our Beckoning Beast. I guess we can talk about how this card interacts against other hand traps too. So let's just say the hypothetical, we have a Dark Beckoning Beast and a Spright Blue. You know, very simple, basic hand, simple stuff. So obviously, if you normal summon Dark Beckoning Beast, a lot of things can happen. Obviously, if they Ash, Veiler, or Imperm, you're totally fine, because you'll have your other Spright cards in hand, assumedly. Probably the worst situation for this would be Gamma, Cyframe Gear Gamma, which can be very painful even for the regular Spright deck. But it's important to look at the rest of your hand and evaluate and always be conscious of, if they actually do Gamma my normal summon and my Beckoning Beast, what am I going to do? This is similar to Deep Sea Diva. Like, as the format progresses and people play Gamma and Ghost Ogre, people will learn to say, oh, I don't always have to normal summon and use my effect, because I can just auto lose to those hand traps. And then, even in that case, if you drew the opening of the Spirit Gates, perhaps it doesn't really matter if you get Gambit on this one. I mean, mainly this is what Monster Reborn is for me. But you know, it's always very important to be cognizant of that. But again, a lot of good players, they just don't immediately Gamma like this, because again, if they know you're on Spright, they're just trying to, you know, use their Gamma on the Gigantic, or trying to use like Gamma Nib, Gamma Ash, Gamma Ogre, you know, in that sense, to just prevent your Gigantic from ever going off. That's usually what most players do, but not everyone does. I guess another important point of this would be like, say if they just have Ghost Ogre, and you get to this point, right? And then, you know, they could Ogre the Reborn effect of your Spirit Gates. Again, you are totally fine with that, right? Absolutely totally fine. When you make the Almirage and this one, and you discard a card to Monster Reborn your Beckoning Beast, they could DD Crow that. Again, in that case, you would be totally fine. So this engine is weird because it just gives your opponent a lot of times to interact with a lot of the commonly played hand traps, so that you can kind of infer a lot of information based on that. And then, so say if I was not going to get interrupted at all, so I have Almirage and the Djinn Buster, and now I can special summon my Spright Blue. So now it's kind of, my opponent is, oh, well, that's a bit rough, right? Because we all know what we do here. We go the Jet, and we go the Starter, and we get the Red. So let's evaluate this point now. So your opponent really needs to have Imperm. they need Imperm to handle this one. So yeah, we would turn the Blue and the Jet into the Gigantic with a card on the field. So they would, if they had like Nibiru and Ash, for example, the Djinn Buster would negate the Ash, and then the Red would negate the Nibiru. Or if they have like the Ghost Ogre, Almirage already deals with that. If they have no interruption for you, you have an extra negate on your board on the Djinn Buster. So this is probably my favorite part of this deck, is how this little mini engine adds to your ability to play through and around hand traps. And even going second, with cards like Dark the Dark Charmer, you can see how, you know, you go Beckoning Beast, Almirage, you can Monster Reborn a Beckoning Beast, then you can Dark Reborn one of their creatures. Yeah, simply Dark Beckoning Beast equals 4 to 5 monsters, if it's allowed to go off. And even if you don't have any Spright monsters at all, it still allows you to combo. Like, the parallels from, say, playing this with like an Adventure Engine instead, so that the Adventure Engine, while it's very good at going second, highly versatile, breaks boards, hand trap interruption as well, they're still, at the end of the day, they're not level 2 monsters, which can often mean that you have a lot of turns that kind of stop out of nowhere, because you either don't have a level 2, where if you did have a level 2, you could at least force players with Gigantic or Elf. But that's really up to you as a deck builder and preference. I personally do not like the Adventure build as much as, say, a build like this, for those reasons. Because I would rather always have the ability to pressure my opponent with level 2 monsters, not just, you know, draw hands of just adventure cards and spells, or adventure cards and hand traps, which does come up a lot. I guess the last point would be about Cap Shell. So obviously this is a 2-card combo, but it's also, say, if you draw like Swap Frog and Splites, you can pull this out of the deck with your Gigantic if you don't need to pull another Swap Frog. But this just increases your likelihood of, I guess, resolving your effects, or I said accessing your Spright engine, because you would, you know, go normal Beckoning Beast and then Spirit Gate, such another Beckoning Beast, and then you would additional summon your Cap Shell, and then you obviously can just link that straight away for an Almirage, and then you would get to draw 1 card. So that just increases your likelihood of accessing your Blue, Jet, or Starter. And then, as well, you can summon back your Cap Shell. You still only might get 1 effect per turn, but you still just put it under the Djinn Buster anyway. So then, on your opponent's turn, if you do this, if you detach the capture, you'll draw an additional card. Again, super fun, interesting, cool card, but you don't need to play it. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully that wasn't too long, and it was fairly informative of, you know, a different way to play Spright and a different way to look at the game currently. Spright has a billion different variants, a lot of innovation, a lot of stuff that you can do, a lot of mind gaming, a lot of next leveling. You know, what are the current trends? What are the current hand traps? How do I play through them? What can my hand play through? And my personal experience playing, you know, the 4 tournaments I've played so far of this current format is that playing Spright, you really have to be aware of almost all the hand traps. You have to, because you're not used to, I'm not used to playing against, you know, DD Crow. I'm not always, you're used to playing against Cyframe Gamma, but it's more or less every opening hand you have to look, you have to evaluate very carefully which hands do I auto lose to, how do I play around that? Which hand traps just stop me entirely, and can I play around it? Often you can, but often you just can't, and we take those losses well. And then there's, I didn't even mention talents. Like, talents is just a god card. There are just times where you get hand trapped and it's just game over for your opponent. There's nothing that they can do. This deck is far too good at going first, and unfortunately I think Toad is going to get banned because as much as I love frogs, Toad is just on another level of card that just creates too much cards you can and can't play, and makes the end board of this deck really boring. Where the end board of this deck could be pretty balanced and fair. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Goodbye. Peace out.